at his door with a wagon tongue. Times were rough and the Indians mocked. Said his prayers with a shotgun cocked. Well, 21 children came to bless old man's home in the wilderness. Slept on the floor with the dogs and the cats.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Longmont Museum. My name is Justin Veach. I'm the manager of the museum's Stewart Auditorium, and I curate public programs. Thanks for coming out. It's good to see you. Before we get going, I want to thank some folks who make our programming possible: the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, the Stewart Family Foundation, the Friends of the Longmont Museum, and of course, our museum members. Do we have any museum members with us? Hey, members, thank you. We simply can't do all that we do without you. And we do quite a lot, actually. In addition to, or on top of all the things that we do, we're expanding. That means the biggest museum in Boulder County is getting bigger. We're adding a 4,000 square foot gallery space, an expanded lobby, and a brand new entrance. So big upgrades. So we'll have a total of 3 galleries. We'll have a dedicated kids space, a dedicated history space, and a dedicated rotating space. And that's that large building that's coming out, thrusting out from to the north here, which is also disrupting our parking. So for those of you who hoofed it from blocks away, I really do appreciate it. And thanks for bearing with us as we grow. I'd also like to thank our media sponsors, the mighty KGNU Community Radio out of Boulder, KUNC, and the Colorado Sound. Tonight, this afternoon, we're coming at, we're live. We're live on the World Wide Web tonight, or this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Compliments of Longmont Public Media. Tonight's program is being offered as part of our ongoing collaboration with our friends at the Longmont Public Library, and we call the series appropriately Library at the Museum. It's kind of like those old, those Reese's peanut butter cups commercials where they'd say, "Your chocolate's in my peanut butter," and they'd get all upset. Well, it's a great combo, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, tonight's program, this special afternoon with Stephen Graham Jones, will be moderated, by the Longmont Public Library's very own ZBassSpeaks. He's also the poet laureate of the city of Lafayette. The poet with the copper voice is a multi-award-winning, twin-spirited indigenous spoken word artist. He has been the poet laureate of Lafayette since April of 2022. The Colorado-born poet has been performing in the Denver metro area since 2008 with the mission to speak on social issues and to promote unity, literacy, and creativity through poetry. Z uses traditional forms and radical fusions of art and poetry. And if you were with us last night for our Dia de Muertos celebration, he's also a fantastic MC. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, please welcome Z-Bass back to the Longmont Museum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special event here. Some housekeeping rules that I will have for you. Please put your phones on silence now. I'm staring at all of you, because if I hear a ringing, there will be a problem. Not really. But anyway, I would also like to give a special thank you to the Longmont Public Library and also the Friends of the Library who are making this program possible as well. So please, a round of applause for them. We are thankful for them making this possible, and if you would like to support the library, you can do so by purchasing Stephen Graham Jones's books out on the entrance over here. Please stick around. There will be a Q&A from the public, and we will be addressing those questions near the end of the program, so please hold on to your questions until the very end. Afterwards, there will also be a book signing as well, so if you would like the opportunity to get your book signed by the man himself, you may do so at the end of the program. Now, let's get this show started. Please help me introduce Stephen Graham Jones. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Man, I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
So, when I was asked to partake in this program, I went on a whole hiatus of learning things about you, reading your books, and just consuming everything that I could about you. And I had this one itching question this whole time, and that question is, what is your favorite screwdriver?
Oh, it's a Kubota, Kubota. That's a tool brand, right? And they make a screwdriver. Like, I'm really into ratcheting screwdrivers. And I thought, like, a few years ago, I'd found the best one, but this new one I got is the best one. I bought a lot of them. I just give them away to gifts when I go places. I give people this screwdriver. It's got just it's like a Star Trek screwdriver. It's amazing.
That's incredible. Have you tried the Wera screwdriver before?
No. How do you spell this?
Wera. It's a German
No. Huh.
company.
What's
there.
special about it? What's it do?
So they have a ratcheting screwdriver where if you access the mechanism to activate the ratcheting, it follows the same direction as well. Yeah. So instead of turning it right to go left, you turn it right to go right.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
That is very cool. I like that. I like that. I've got a whole little museum in my garage of different ratcheting screwdrivers I've got.
Same here, same here. But we're not here to talk about screwdrivers, although I'm sure that we could very much fascinate all of you with that. We're here to talk about you and your books and just the incredible portfolio that you have under your belt. Let's start with the first book, Buffalo Hunter Hunter, one of the latest ones. It's my personal favorite. If you have not listened to the audiobook, I would highly encourage you listening to the audiobook. This is one of the few ones where the three actors are just stellar and just have you hooked into this book. Tell us about your process about making Buffalo Hunter. If I remember correctly, this is your first vampire book. What was that process like of tackling this story?
Yeah, all I had was an image. It was a chapel, like not this big, but a church chapel, and there was an old-timey priest, preacher, pastor or something at the front doing his thing on a Sunday, and he gets done, his congregation files out, and there's one dude sitting in the back, Indian dude. I know he was Blackfeet then, but I should have known because all my characters are Blackfeet. But and he's wearing a Jesuit robe, and he wants to talk to this preacher. That's all I had when I started this book. I didn't know anything else that was going to happen. And so I sat down. I thought, well, I better put that preacher up behind his lectern or podium or whatever. I don't know, church stuff, whatever it's called. I had to do a lot of searching stuff up. But then right when I sat down to put him up at the front of that chapel, Etsy kind of stepped in and started doing her thing. And it turned out she was necessary and good. She was a total surprise to me. I didn't know she was going to be in the room, and I wouldn't have named her Etsy if I'd had a choice, but I didn't have a choice. That's just who she was. I don't feel like I have choices in the things I write. They just kind of happen. And I didn't know it was going to be epistolary either, so I was kind of surprised that it was epistolary. So it just kept surprising me. And, I did it in 10 weeks, but there was a lot of research involved, but it wasn't the only research I really did was I knew I needed to know a lot of language stuff to make those compound names that Goodstab uses. I knew I needed to know a lot about the Marias or Bear Creek Massacre, and I knew I needed to know a lot about Blackfeet history going back a couple hundred years. And so I called up 3 friends. Each of those friends were a specialist in these areas. One of them teaches language, one of them's written a book on Blackfeet history, and one of them had a whole lot of old clippings and letters and stuff about the Marias Massacre, and I said, send me y'all's junk, and they sent me their junk, and that's the kind of research I do. I always, when I actually have to research something, it's neat because there's wonderful stuff to be found, but I always feel like I'm a failure because I think, why can't I just lie well enough that people believe it,
I made the mistake of finishing the book and then watching the movie Sinners right afterwards. So it was just vampire galore for me, and I think that's also just increased the infatuation that I had with this book. For those who have not read it, there are 3 characters that this story revolves around with. Can you tell me a little bit more of how was it to differentiate the language and the form of speaking between the 3 different characters, since they have different cultural nuances, and it was very impressive because it definitely made it feel more lively and like they were right there, or they would have been part of history at one point.
Thank you very much. it was, for me, it was all about, I mean, you have to like occupy a different headspace for each of those characters. And like with Etsy, she is more or less, and I think she's younger than me actually. And let's see, 42, I don't know. I think she's 42, is that right? Whatever the math is backwards from there in 2012, I don't know. It's somewhere in the late 20th century, I don't know. So we're about the same age probably. Anyways, yeah, Arthur Bocarn, the pastor, he's Lutheran, which I don't really know what that is very well. And he is educated at the school that will become Yale. And he just grew up in a totally different era than I did. And so he was educated at the school that would become Yale, and then he was isolated in the West, kind of in a hothouse of like a rye bottle, pretty much. And so his vocabulary crumbled down, and then he kind of built it back up, but he only has like an 80% grasp on all the words he uses, which was really, really fun. I love doing that. And then Goodstab was raised radically different than I was. Like, I was raised on Scooby-Doo, and he was not, you know? Like, he didn't know what a Fruit Loop is or anything. And he was raised in the oral storytelling tradition. So when he tells a story, it's more performative for him. He's less doing a text out loud and more doing a performance. And also, like in the Western tradition, you differentiate between the natural and the supernatural. Goodstab doesn't have any use for that distinction. It's all one reality to him. It doesn't even interpenetrate. It's just one big smear. It's just the way it is. So I had to think like him as well, which was a trick. But what I found was if I could come up with like strictures for each different character's language, that would help me get into their mind space. So Etsy, being from the contemporary era, she has access to any punctuation she wants. She could have used footnotes if she wanted. I didn't let her, but she could have. And then Arthur, he uses coordinating conjunctions in a specific way. He used those really long dashes, and he has a few. Like, I had a whole list, probably 12 or 15 things that made his language particular. And then Goodstab, he gets no dashes. I don't think he gets any ellipses, and he uses coordinating conjunctions opposite to the way Arthur uses them, which was really fun. I mean, I say fun. It was kind of a headache, but it was also fun, you know. It was a headache on proofing because I'd have to go through and realize where I'd stumbled, so I had to redo that paragraph to match the right way that Goodstab uses words. But it was finally helpful. Although I will say, when we submitted to copy editing, my editor put a note and he said, "Stephen does a lot of peculiar things in here. Please don't touch them." And they came back very touched. Like the copy editor, the first time he hit one of Arthur's long EM dashes, which is really just a double EM dash with the kerning turned down, he said, "Oh, this writer is evidently screwing up. I'm going to fix that for him." So he hit global replace and killed every one of them in the book. And so I had to go back and fix all those. And I mean, of course, copy editors, they want to standardize the language. They want it to make sense, you know, but epistolary people don't make sense necessarily.
I totally get that. I really appreciated just the distinctions between that, and it felt very historical and raw. Going further into the story, in one article you were being interviewed and you described that you were looking into this world and the worlds that you create in these books through a keyhole. And by technicality, I guess it would make you a scribe. In this story, that there's been a few moments where I was like, "What? No!" And like my wife will tell you that while I'm listening to the story, there's some twists and there's some things that happen, and I'm like losing my mind actively. As a scribe, there's sometimes a need to embellish or to maybe manipulate the story. Do you feel the need to sometimes do that in your stories, or do you just feel of like just recording and documenting what you see?
I think I do, but I think the way it works in my head is I write for 10 or 12 pages and I get bored and I'm like, there's no blood. And so then I just kill somebody. And so then something exciting happens and I'm interested for 10 more pages, you know? So.
That sounds pretty fair, honestly. It's like, yeah, no, for sure. Another topic that I wanted to kind of cover was just the realism of your monsters. We've covered werewolves and vampires in this latest book, and plenty other ones in your book catalog. Do you feel a need to sequentially kind of check them off, or what are your plans for the future, if we can get a take on that?
Yeah, I haven't even done all the Universal monsters yet, really. But probably I'm not going to check them all off, because pretty soon I'll be doing mermaids and stuff like that. And nothing against mermaids, it's just I don't think I'm a mermaid writer, So I don't know if I'm going to do them justice. Although I love those mermaid documentaries do y'all know those documentaries? They're the best things ever. I watch those, and for 6 months after, I believe in mermaids, But I like making up monsters too, But as for the realism of the monsters, I always kind of subscribe to Alan Moore's, the way he wrote Watchmen. The question he asked himself, it feels like, is, what if superheroes were real? Then what are the ripples? How does this change the whole world? How does this change our existence? And number one, you don't have superhero comics, you have pirate comics, and you have sponsors, and just all this other stuff that surrounds superheroes. And so I asked myself, if vampires were real, what would it be like for them? That's what I did with werewolves too, and mongrels. But two, these are inherited creatures, inherited monsters. A lot of other people have been shaping them for centuries, with the result being, how to explain it? I guess, 500 years ago, somebody's talking about a strigoi, a Serbian vampire or something, and it rises from the dead, and it comes and drinks the blood of the village at night and then goes back to its grave. And I think when you tell a story like that, you realize the village is going to be gone in 2 weeks. And so you have to come up with strictures. So you say it can't cross a threshold without being invited in. That'll keep the village percolating longer, such that the story can keep being told. And that's good story grease. And because it works in that story, it gets encoded into the characteristic set of the vampire. And that happens over and over. So pretty soon vampires are telepathic, they turn to mist, they sparkle, they do all kinds of stuff. And with the result being that the vampire, to me, that we've inherited doesn't really make sense. It's as a creature that is actually a good predator, that it can exist in the real world. And so for me to, invest in this creature, this monster, I have to believe in it. And to believe in it, I have to strip off all the characteristics that I think are inessential. And I'm left with just the bare bones vampire. And then I can add 2 or 3 things of my own back on.
Incredible. Oh my goodness. And we'll take notes on that for sure. So you're mainly known as the horror novelist. In leading up to this event, I have described you basically as the indigenous version of Stephen King, just by how insane it almost feels like of how you write these books out in just sequential almost. Do you feel like there are elements of poetry in your work that you have added in, either consciously or subconsciously, and do you feel like there is a bridge that could be made in that?
Oh, there definitely is. I love it when a story works by association rather than causation. I think poetry, you can't ever put poetry under a glass and say this is poetry. It's too fast for that. But one characteristic I would say of poetry more than of fiction is that it moves by association. It makes leaps that the language sort of allows, or I don't know, it's like the language, I wouldn't call it a trampoline. I don't know. I don't write poetry, so I don't know exactly the mechanism. You could explain it a lot better than I could, but poetry has a magic to it that impresses me, and I read a lot of poetry, so I think it definitely makes its way onto the page. But those leaps, those associative leaps, that's what I'm always reaching for in fiction. It's easy to tell a story that's dominoes tapping into each other. That's causation. But knock over 15 dominoes and the reader gets into the loop of it, and then you make a big associative leap, and hopefully you've got enough momentum, you can make that leap, and that feels like poetry to me, and that's when I think things are really cooking.
I definitely experienced that with Buffalo Hunter Hunter for sure. Can you tell that I like Buffalo Hunter Hunter? There was a lot of, I found rhythms within it, especially long term. It was very beautifully done. And I was like, wow, okay, Stephen Graham Jones, low-key a poet as well, for sure. There was a lot of instances where I was like, that's a bar, like that's a solid straight bar. Like I could definitely hear a rapper just like manipulating it a little bit, and like Shakespeare would probably say that myself. It was very fascinating, very lovely to see. There's kind of, I guess George Lucas made a statement about that of, like, it's almost like poetry. Things rhyme, things repeat, and I love the almost poetic sense on how some of the characters engage each other and how they do that in repetition. And there's small nuances of changes, which I would highly encourage you guys reading and see if you can pick up on that. So I guess, how did you even get started with writing horror?
With writing horror, my very first story I ever wrote when I was 19 years old was a ghost story. So I think horror is where I started. I strayed for a while into the fields of literary fiction, but I came back to horror pretty quick. Like when I went to grad school, I told myself you can only go if you're going in ninja mode, which is to say you're sneaking in to this establishment to steal good craft out so you can put it into science fiction, fantasy, westerns, horror. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since, you know, because those are the genres that saved me when I was 12 years old, you know, and I want to pay back into those genres, and they're just still where my heart is. Nothing against literary fiction. I read literary fiction as well. I think of the genres like science fiction turns you into a 10-year-old kid going out into the yard and looking up in awe at the vastness of the cosmos, and fantasy makes you want to turn a pillowcase into a tunic and have a sword fight on your lawn, you know, and that's great and wonderful. Horror turns you into a 10-year-old kid hiding under the covers, you know, which I think is great. And literary fiction, it just kind of sends you to bed without dinner, you know, and but sometimes you need that, I think, you know.
How would you engage a reader who is maybe not a big fan of horror, but maybe are interested in dabbling into that genre?
I think what I would say, like about Buffalo Hunter, I would say you should read this. It's super literary. There's no horror. You're not going to find any dead people, and hopefully they get hooked before they figure it out. You know.
Basically, just lie to them. Oh, fair enough. One thing that I don't think a lot of people know about you is that you also have a graphic novel series as well. I am a huge comic book fan as well, so when I found out that you also have engaged in that type of genre, I was just ecstatic. What was the first comic book that just got you hooked into the genre itself?
It was Secret Wars #4 by Jim Shooter. Do y'all remember Secret Wars? Some of y'all? What happened was, like, we lived so far out in the country, like every 2 weeks on a Wednesday afternoon, my mom would bundle us all up into our big Suburban and drive us into town to get groceries. And the Suburban, it was missing the back glass, and so you couldn't drive very far without getting like carbon monoxided. So we'd have to stop, you know, on the way to town. And we'd stop at this place called Pecan Grove, this gas station with like 15 trailers behind it. And my mom would give each of us kids $3 that we could go in and spend at this store. And every time I'd get my $3 and I would beeline the case, the cooler in the back to get a Dr. Pepper, because we never had Cokes growing up. And so getting a Dr. Pepper was amazing, you know. But one of those Wednesdays when I must have been 12, yeah. I have my $3 in hand and I'm beelining that back cooler. When I'm apprehended, I'm stopped by this new thing by the register. It's a spinner rack, and that spinner rack is stocked with comic books. It's a new thing at this Pecan Grove little gas station, and I spun it. And these covers were so garish and loud and actiony and hooky. And I finally picked out Secret Wars #4, in which the Incredible Hulk is under, like, I think the caption says 300 billion tons of rock, and somehow he's holding it up. And he's got like Captain Marvel, Iron Man, Reed Richards, they're all under him. He's saving their lives. And the caption is like, how much longer can he hold this 300 billion tons up, or something like that. And I was like, I gotta know. So I spent my $3 on that instead of a Dr. Pepper, you know, which is also the healthy choice, you know. And I took it home, and I was hooked for life. And I followed Secret Wars as well as I could. I wasn't at Pecan Grove regularly, so I didn't get it like all in sequence until years later. But I did get number 10. And the premise of Secret Wars is this cosmic entity accidentally figured out that humans have desire, and he doesn't know desire because he's all powerful. So he abducts a lot of superheroes, a lot of villains, and builds a planet called Battle Planet and puts them on that planet to understand desire because they want to kill each other. They desire to win. And Dr. Doom, being Dr. Doom, he's got big ideas. He's like, I'm not going to fight these stupid heroes. I want your power, Beyonder. And so he comes for Beyonder. He builds him a special suit. That's his. It's always his secret weapon is a special suit, you know. And he's coming at Beyonder, and there's a panel in issue 10 where Dr. Doom has had an arm cut off or maybe a leg. He's broken and bleeding. He is functionally dead, but his one arm he has left is still reaching for the Beyonder's power. And that really got to me, that he would push through that hard and not give up. And all through my high school years after that, there was so much violence and moving and kicked out of schools and police officers and mental health people at the house all the time and all kinds of wackiness going on every single day. And there were so many times that I should have given up, but every time I should have given up, I would think about Dr. Doom. And I would think, if he can still reach for it, I can still reach for it. And so I feel like comic books saved my life. And they mean a lot to me. And so I'll probably always keep dabbling in them. Prose fiction is where I belong, but I just love comic books.
So taking the elements of these raw human emotions and experiences in your writing, how do you find balance when tackling more of the darker and more nitty-gritty things like grief, trauma, and justice? How do you tackle that with your writing?
I don't know, man. How do I do that? I probably just try to insert a few chuckles, because that makes the world real. Like, yes, we're going to cry, but we're going to laugh as well. Like when I'm reading or watching something, and it's all grief, dour, sad, then I check out, because that's not the real world to me. That's not how people actually respond to bad things, in my experience. People make bad jokes, or they trip over a Frito and fall into the dip or something. Like funny stuff happens, and in my stuff, it's not that I strategically say, oh, we need a laugh here, but what I do is when I'm revising, I don't delete that stuff that shows up. I let it stay, such that it's kind of organically built in. And the trick with humor, though, is always you. If you're the one telling the joke or whatever the funny thing is supposed to be, you're extending yourself. You're putting your head on a chopping block, because you don't know if people are going to laugh. You might fall flat on your face. But if you make yourself vulnerable, then I think you can do better art. That's where good art comes from, I think, is making yourself vulnerable. And the humor, I think, puts me in that vulnerable space because I never know if it's going to work or if it's going to get me canceled or if it's going to out me as someone who likes dad jokes or whatever it is, It could be all of the above at once, too.
Well, tackling on that writing experience and journey, how do you keep things fresh and avoid like cliches? Of course, there's always going to be a cliche that's unavoidable, but is there a technique or something what's your state of mind when tackling that part of your writing?
Yeah, you can't avoid like cliche builds or phrases or even words, to tell you the truth, or characters. But the trick is go ahead and put that on the page, I think, but then push it a little bit or turn it inside out. And also, I'm a big fan of don't be afraid of the cliche because it's there for a reason. We use it over and over because it works, Like if I have a good wrench, then just because it works all the time doesn't mean I'm going to stop using it,
Do you have a favorite dad joke that you wrote in one of your books where like, this is the one?
No, I can't tell. I'm not a good joke teller because I generally, not generally, I sometimes can remember the punchline, and because I know the punchline, I start laughing immediately, and that doesn't work,
Yeah. I'm not a dad yet, but I think in jokes in general, I tend to face that problem as well. And so with horror, there's so much to cover, from psychological to monsters to mysteries and having the human element in it. To you, what's the most horrifying? Supernatural, human? What's your take on that? What scares you the most?
I do think people are the scariest monster. Like with a werewolf, with a zombie, with a vampire, we can be scared in the moment, but we know that those things have zippers down their backs, basically, you know? But our neighbor who has dark imaginings and sharp blades, they don't have zippers, you know? Or if they do, they're going to use them on you, probably. So yeah, people are terribly scary to me. But as far as supernatural, or as far as the traditional or conventional or typical horror, like builds or creatures or subgenres, the most scary to me is possession horror. That really frightens me. It's the loss of autonomy, you know, which I mean, really I see possession beyond a spectrum. Like possession in the individual, is possession. Possession of a neighborhood is gentrification. Possession of a continent is colonization, you know? And I think it's all the same dynamic. It just depends on how many people are involved. And so I think that's a big part of why possession makes me nervous, because it's basically being colonized.
So until you experience an exorcism yourself, I guess humans are the next best fear factor then.
Yeah, and I'm not experiencing an exorcism anytime soon. And anytime I hear about that stuff, people, when I go to different cities all over the world, people always say, "Hey, come to this scary haunted place," and I'm like, "No, I'm going to stay here at the La Quinta. I'm pretty happy, man."
Yeah, I'm definitely the same person. I was like, "Let's play the Ouija board." I'm like, "Nope, I'm going home because I don't play with that stuff."
Yeah, you can step in something and track it back into your life, man.
Yeah, for sure. And while I try to be a person of science, I'm not gonna risk it. I've seen enough horror movies in my life to I'm like, nope, I'm good. Like, y'all can die, and I'll bring flowers for your grave, but I'm not gonna be the one in there. Nor will I be the person to say split up.
Exactly. Like the people who get eaten by the haunted house, or the people who go up to the haunted house and push the doorbell. You know?
Right. I think that's the funny thing about people. Like, let's go do it. I'm like, are you really sure you want to do this? But self-preservation.
That's why possession scares me also, because like little Reagan in The Exorcist, she's just bopping along outside Washington, D.C. and having a good little 10-year-old life or whatever, and suddenly a demon from Mesopotamia or wherever strikes across the ocean and jumps into her body and her life and her mind, not because she rang the doorbell, because it's arbitrary, it's random, and that randomness is really frightening. I think that's why serial killer stories tend to be frightening as well, because you can get targeted just for walking down the street.
And I was reading your I Used to Be a Teenage Slasher book, which was really cool. And it got me thinking, have you in your mind or in one of your books created the perfect crime in your situation?
Well, I've done a pretty good one anyways. I have a story, a novel, maybe it's a novelette, maybe it's a novella, I don't even know how long it is. It's Interstate Love Affair, I think that's the title of it. And it's got this serial killer in it, this dude who has a truck with a camper, and he goes up and down I-10, down through the South, doing what he does. He kills people. But serial killers usually get busted because the bodies they leave behind get tied to them in some way. And so I wanted him to be able to keep doing what he's doing, on the page anyways. And so he needed a good method of body disposal. And what he lands on really quickly is he'll go to the pound and say, "Oh yeah, that's my Great Dane." He'll go to Craigslist and say, "I want that Rottweiler," and he'll gather him up, 10 or 15 dogs, big dogs. Then he'll kill them and hollow them out and cut up his victims and put a leg into this Great Dane, and a head into that Rottweiler, and then put them on the interstate so they get ran over for days by the big trucks. And nobody looks inside dead animals on the interstate, They're supposed to be grody. And so I think that was I think that would work,
I wouldn't know about that. I'm not a cop myself. For all intents and purposes, lawyers, please. It was just a joke.
But I did wonder if I should publish that because I thought, what if somebody gets an idea? You know, that's always the question with horror: is somebody going to get an idea?
Do you fear that one maybe like one day like the next Ted Bundy would be like Stephen Graham Jones was my guy?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I get nervous about it, but I also know that people with those impulses have those impulses, and they're going to use whatever media happens to be around. They can use, I don't know, like maybe Tony the Tiger from Frosted Flakes is their excuse for killing people. You know, that doesn't really indict Tony the Tiger, I don't think. So, I mean, I do worry about roadkill now, I guess, but I don't like. If I start limiting myself to only using ideas that I think aren't good, I'm probably not going to write good stories.
Right, for sure. Do you feel that there's a misconception with like horror writers or just people who write like darker stuff or things that are too taboo for human conversation? Do you feel like there's a misconception about that?
I do, yeah. Like people always think that we're dark and twisted, but you know, I've trafficked in I think the communities of all the different genres. Maybe not Western. I don't know if there's really a community of Western writers anymore, but I traffic among a lot of the different communities, and the nicest people I've found are in horror. And I think the reason for that is horror stories, man, 9 times out of 10, they're in some fashion about bullies. And therefore, I think that happens because people who write horror have generally been bullied themselves. And I think when you yourself have been bullied, then you're less likely to bully other people, you know? I mean, that's not a pure dynamic. I know that kids who like suffer abuse kind of grow up to reenact that abuse, that kind of stuff, you know? But all the people I know who write horror, who themselves had a rough time of it in one way or another, they are very compassionate, supportive people. Like horror writers, whenever one of us hits it big, it's a win for all of us. We don't scheme behind each other's backs and say, haha, I'm glad they're on the remainder table, or any of that, you know? Or I haven't seen that if it happens anyways.
Do you think it's because I believe that there's a dark side to everybody, whether we show it to the public or not. Do you think that it enables the distinction of being able to let go of those personal traumas and those dark feelings out in an artistic way that provides positivity?
Yeah, catharsis, right. Stephen King, like somebody asked him once, they said, you must sleep well because, no, they said, what'd they say? You must have the worst nightmares because you write all this scary stuff. And Stephen King said, no, I sleep great. I give my nightmares away, you know, which is a wonderful answer. It's really elegant. And I thought that must be the way it is. And so that's not the way it is, though, man. I found that putting my fears on the page just gives them like names and shapes and makes them a lot more real than they used to be. So it doesn't make for me, it's not catharsis. It's more like if I'm in this room alone, except for a badger, then I'm going to watch that badger every single move it makes because I don't want that badger getting behind me, you know? I mean, I don't mean to mischaracterize badgers, but I think they're kind of mean, you know? And I think that's why I write horror, because I know there's bad things, but if I can keep looking directly at them, they can't get behind me.
Wow.
But as far as the community, I do think that horror, we've been considered weirdos for so long that we've been we've become outsiders, but outsiders tend to develop a sense of solidarity, and that becomes community, and we support each other, and it feels good, you know?
Do you think that it provides an opportunity of self-reflection of oneself, of like, dang, I really need to go to therapy for this after writing this book?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% sure that I need therapy, but I'm also terrified of going because what if it fixes me? I'm not going to write books anymore, you know?
I have the same problem too. I think that there's that mojo that's associated with it. I was like, I can't lose that sometimes. Like, I know that it's a problem, but like,
Yeah, exactly.
like listen, like I need the toxicity of this, like, you know, I need it, and it's a weird like parasite almost of that.
Yeah, you kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say I cultivate the injuries or anything, but I don't put Neosporin on them either, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you feel like, so you're a professor as well, do you feel like they're the work of your students influences you, and does that kind of mix up with that as well?
Yeah, it does. You know, I remember years ago, a student came to my office and she said, "I've got the best title for a book I'm going to write." And she was a grad student, and I said, "Oh yeah, tell me what it is." And she looked around all nervously, like there was microphones. And then she like closed the door a little bit, and she eased her chair like right up to me, so she was whispering. And she said, "Growing Up Dead in Texas." And I was like, "Wow, that is a good title." And she said, "But you can't use it." And I was like, "What? Of course, I'm a professor. What do you think?" But then a few years later, I wrote a book, and the only title that would fit on it was "Growing Up Dead in Texas." And so I found that grad student finally through social media or something, and I said, "Hey, will you sell me that title? Because I want to use it." And she said, "You don't have to. I'm never gonna write that book. You can just have the title." And I was like, phew. And the reason I was relieved was because I was already using that title, you know. So
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess that it all worked out. Because that would have been a very expensive lawyer talk. I was like, "Hey, listen, I kind of messed up. How well can we fix this, and how quickly can we get that done?" Do you think you would have done a recall for that if it didn't work out?
no, I just would have ran away probably. I don't know, because I definitely was using that title. That was already the title the publisher had and was putting in their marketing and everything. So it was going to happen. The fallout, I don't know what the fallout would have been, but I'm glad it all worked out. So that's the thing to focus on, I think. It all worked out.
Have any real life experiences made themselves into your stories as well?
Oh yeah, like constantly. People think that I make stuff up, but I make so little stuff up, really. My first novel, I had no idea how to write a novel. I'd gone through writing programs, but in writing programs, you learn how to write stories, not novels. And suddenly I had to do a novel for my dissertation, and I had no idea how to do it. And I very quickly learned that what a novel is you run really fast for 10 or 12 pages, and you hit a wall, and you don't know how to get through it, over it, under it, around it. And like nowadays, you go onto social media and you like do the hand to the forehead thing, and you cast about like I'm so tragic and romantic, I'm a writer. But you know, in 1998, you couldn't do that, or if you could, I didn't know how to do it anyways. And also, I didn't have time. I was under a big deadline. I had to pay another semester of tuition if I didn't get this written, and I had no money. So the solution I chanced upon was every 10 or 12 pages, when I hit that wall, I just pulled a piece of my life out and put on the page and changed the names. And that got me through that novel. It's really weird for me to look at or think of that novel, The Fast Red Road, because it's so autobiographical. I mean, it's got giant coyotes, it's got submarines in New Mexico, it's got a Trans Am that goes about 170. But I think I've only been in a Trans Am that went 160, so I was lying at that, you know. But it's weird to me because it's my life, you know. And because it worked that first time, I've kept doing it through every one of my books. Every one of my books feels weirdly autobiographical. I have to always, when I do book events, I have to try to separate myself. Like that's that book, and this is me, you know.
So, I guess with your day-to-day life, do you just experience things and write it down? Oh, this could be good for a book, like my broken leg. Write that down.
No, I think I do write things down, but it's generally just stupid things. You know, a while back I was on the Lobo Trail between Boulder and Longmont, and there's a bridge. There's a sharp incline, and then you make a really sharp turn, and you're lucky if you don't skid out, and you take this little bridge over a creek. And so I was doing that one day in the hot sun, and you probably get up on a mountain bike, you're probably going about 40 when you make that turn onto that bridge, and that bridge has rails on the side, so you can't see the bridge. And so I make that turn, and I feel lucky that I made it. And what surprised me was some first grade teacher had taken her kids on a field trip, and they were hiding from the sun on that bridge, and they were sitting on each side of the rails, on each side of the bridge, and I was going way too fast to stop, and I had to somehow thread the needle between all their feet, which they drew in, and it was so scary. I could have broke all their legs, but I think I am going to make that into a story. And
Well, I'm sure we'll be looking forward to reading that. You heard it here, folks.
There's going to be a lot of broken legs in that story.
Ouch, ouch, ouch. I think from my experience, like poetry doesn't have a space or an event. It's just sometimes words just hit my head like a brick, and I'm almost like, okay, I need to write it down. So now I have a notebook in the bathroom. I have a recorder in my car. I always carry a notebook. I was like, because if I don't write some of the stuff down, like I'm gonna lose it forever. And sometimes it's on napkins, which I'm sorry that I have stolen all the napkins from every restaurant I've gone to.
I used in the summer times, like in the summer you wear shorts, or I wear shorts anyways. But what I love about wearing shorts is when I don't have a piece of paper on me, I can pull my shorts up and write all over my thigh and pull my shorts down, and nobody knows I've got notes on my leg, you know?
Yeah, I think you made a mention that you have like a very speedy just turnout when it comes to writing your books, and you just find that zone. I think you were able to like finish most of a book on a plane. Was that right?
I don't know, maybe. I have taken some long flights. I don't know. But, I mean, I've started a whole lot of books on planes. I don't know if I've ever finished one on a plane. I don't know if I have. But anyways, yeah, I do kick stuff out fast. But it's not. I don't think it's because I have good work habits or anything like that. The reason I kick stuff out fast is to get back to the real world. Like when I'm writing a novel, I almost immediately lose the line between real and story. Or I think what it is I have to give realness to the story in order to write about it. I have to believe in it that deeply. But living in that space where I don't know anymore what's actual and what's made up, what's fiction, is uncomfortable. So I just go really, really fast to get back to having my both feet in the real world. But I go back again and again. You know, it's kind of stupid. I need to learn a different way to do it. But maybe someday. I don't know.
Yeah. So would you have any advice on finding balance between the writer and your personal life and being a professor and a husband and a father?
You know, I used to tell people, choose writing over everything, but family, health, and I had a third thing, but I don't remember what that third thing was. You know, like I don't know, car maintenance. I don't know what it was, but it used to be really important. But now it's just two things: family and health, because you got to have a support system around you, and you got to be able to get to the keyboard, basically, or the notebook, or however you write. So I guess I don't have balances, I guess is my answer, but I do prioritize family and health.
Do you ever find yourself like bouncing ideas off from other people, especially your family?
I do. My wife, I'll talk to her about stuff, and she'll help me too. She's like, I would have never got the title for Earth Divers without her, and she helped me a lot with Buffalo Hunter actually. Not Buffalo Hunter. She helped me a lot with the novel coming out in the fall. We had to do a big drive from out east back here to Colorado, or back to Montana, really. And over the course of that drive, we talked the novel through, and I'm really kind of superstitious about talking novels through, but I trust her, so I think she wouldn't want to torpedo me, you know. So.
Well, that's very lovely. I've always been worried of like guys. So what do you think if like this and this and this, and they're like, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's very lovely. I think we're getting closer to the end of time, but I think I would like to kind of, before we conclude this, outside of just telling a story and providing that experience, and of course selling those books and hoping for the best for success of it, what is your personal objective for readers that you want to leave with them or give to them?
I want them to be thrilled, but I want them to feel things in a real way. Like my favorite moment I've written in any of my books is in The Last Final Girl. It's a novel about a killer called Billie Jean. He wears a red jacket and he's got a sparkly white glove, and every time he gets into his slashing mood, he has a sword too. I think Billie Jean starts playing from the trees, you know, and he always looks around. He doesn't understand where this is coming from, which he shouldn't, because I don't know either. But so it sounds like a totally absurd premise, and it is. You know, absurd premises are the most fun to play with, I think. But there's a main character in there, a final girl called Izzy, and she is an outcast at her high school and in her family kind of as well. She has a lot of friction with her dad, who's a heavy drinker, and she gets pulled onto the homecoming court. It's kind of like a Carrie situation. Like, she knows she's going to be the butt of this joke, but she has a glimmer of hope that maybe, that's how you get pulled into those jokes. You think maybe. And so she's there at halftime at the big football game on a Friday night, and she's under the stands, and the 2 or 3 people in front of her, maybe the 4 people in front of her, their dads stick their arm out, and the girl takes it, and they get chaperoned out to the middle of the football field. I know that's called something. 50-yard line, right? I was going to say half line, but that's not right. I don't know football. And when it's time for her to get delivered out, her dad is not there, and her dad is not there, and her dad is not there, and how can she get out there to have her possible moment of glory? And then when she's about to give up, her little brother, whom her and her little brother always have friction, he shows up in an ill-fitting suit, and he sticks his arm out, and he takes her out there, And that's my favorite moment I've ever looked into writing, and what I hope is that the readers got some version or measure of what I felt writing that,
Yeah. Beautiful. So, if you couldn't tell, I love Buffalo Hunter Hunter. It's probably one of my favorite books of this year for sure. I loved it so much that when I bought my copy, I rebound it in leather, genuine leather, and I did the tooling on it. And if you don't mind, I would love for you to read a passage from it.
Sure, man.
My favorite passage, I think, is on page 163, the first 2 sentences, and I'll let you share that with us.
Thank you. Man, I'm so self-conscious. Y'all see how my pants are coming up from my boots? Like, these pants were too loose last week, and I thought, I know how to fix that. I'll put them in the dryer. So I put them in the dryer and dried them a long time, and I didn't know until I sat down up here that it made them get shorter, It's so weird.
I think that you look great.
All right. I don't have glasses, so I may misspeak here. This is the vampire Goodstab speaking about some violence he committed. Blood was pouring down my side, out of me, and was still leaking from my back, and the rest of me was shining and covered in it. Another story we have is of Blood Clot Boy, and how I look now is how I always saw Blood Clot Boy in my head, the way Otter Goes Back would explain him, his voice whispering to all his children, so all his children would lean in to hear better. But Blood Clot Boy was a hero in all the stories. That's not what I am. I'm the one who killed Beaver Chief's people. I'm the one with the Catman inside me. I'm the one who has to drink the blood of my people just so I can keep drinking that blood. And now there were 7 smelly Napequans standing around me, 2 of them holding burning torches, one of them trying to hold his shotgun steady on me, the rest of them raising their long shooter guns, 3 of them screaming because they didn't know what I was. What I am is the Indian who can't die. I'm the worst dream America ever had. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think we're ready to open up for the Q&A. There is going to be a staff member with a microphone, so if you would like to ask a question to Stephen, please raise up your hand, and we will try to make our way to you with the microphone.
But not about my pants. I already answered that.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Ready. Let's see.
Hi. So I've got the first question. So we're here, over here. Hi. We're here because our son Gilhud read your book, Buffalo Hunter Hunter, and he's like, it's awesome, it's amazing, you have to get the book. And then I started looking into all the books that you've written. And you wrote a book that I haven't gotten yet, but I have a question about it, 7 Spanish Angels.
Yeah.
And I'm from El Paso, Texas. And so I always am curious when people write about a place that you're from, like, how do you go there and write about El Paso and Juarez?
Yeah, that was tricky for me because, I mean, I grew up going to El Paso, but I'm not from there. Actually, I do have my favorite, maybe my least favorite, actually. My least favorite El Paso story is when I was 17, I fell asleep in a stall with a steer and woke with a spider egg in my arm, you know? And I always associate El Paso with getting lanced by a doctor, you know? So I don't recommend getting spider eggs in your arm if you can help it. It's not fun. But what I did for that novel was I made myself not go to El Paso until I'd written the novel. And then once I had it on the page, then I went to El Paso for a few days and hung out and drove all around and looked at the murals and everything. And but the reason I did that was because I didn't want to be like hindered, controlled by where this road actually meets that road. I wanted to make it all up and then after the fact make it fit because I wanted the story to develop organically. But Seven Spanish Angels is currently unavailable. It may never be available again. I don't know. It's the only one of my books right now that is, well, I mean, there's 2 or 3 of them that are momentarily out of print, but it's because I had to pull the rights from one place and give them to another place, so it's still coming out again. But Seven Spanish Angels, I don't know if it'll ever come out again or not. I need to look at it again to see if I like it still. That's the trick. But the problem is having time to look at it because I keep just writing new stuff instead. I'm never good at looking back. I always like to be writing new stuff. Like when somebody tells me, here's notes on this novel, I'm like, how about I just throw this novel away and write a different novel, you know? Because it's easy to write novels. It's hard to fix novels, man. And so I don't know if I'll go back to Seven Spanish Angels or not. Maybe. It was fun to write, though. It was fun. I liked it at the time I wrote it, but I associated a lot of trauma with writing that novel. I was writing it for this publisher in New York City, and I wrote it really quickly, 350 pages. And I was in New York City at the time, and I gave it to an editor on an afternoon, came back to his office the next day, and he had the whole manuscript sitting there on his desk, and he had somehow read it all that night, which is like a special power editors have, I don't know. And he picked up the first page, and he read it to me, and I was like, and he set it down, and I thought, this is going to take a while, you know? But what he did was he put his hand on that page he just read, and he said, that was a really good page. And I said, all right. And then he put his hand on the rest of it and pushed it away, and he said, this, not so much. And he said, you got to start over build it from that page. And so I did it again, and this time he said, first 10 pages, acceptable, the rest of it, crap. And we did that until I'd written about 750,000 words to finally get about 110,000 words. And it was a long, arduous, terrible process, and then we got in a huge fight at the end. Well, I don't know if it's a huge fight. He did a lot of yelling. I just sat there. But because it was a serial killer novel, and he said, this time he said, these 349 pages good. This very last page is bad, but I know how to fix it. And he said the way to fix it is to make the serial killer a surprise hermaphrodite. And so without skipping a beat, I said, you know, that's a really interesting idea. Why don't you overnight me the Blu-ray of South Park where Cartman's mom is a hermaphrodite? I want to do research on this wonderful idea you have. And he hung up on me. And then there was so much yelling. There was like weeks of yelling, but I wouldn't do it. That seemed like a terrible thing to engage, you know? I'm not going to like indict a whole like pie wedge of the population just for fun, you know? Maybe not for any reason, but and so he canceled the book and gave me all the rights back, and we'd done this really expensive photo shoot, like where they took me down to the subway in New York City, and then some maintenance person like knew of a secret door, and he took me through that secret door that went down to like an old subway system that was all covered in like silt. And I thought, wow, nobody sees this. Then he took me to another door, and we went to an even lower subway, like a subway from 1300, I don't know. And we did a photo shoot down there, but with this famous photographer at the time. But I've never seen those photos because they hadn't come back by the time we had our big blowout, you know? And the book did get published digitally in like 2011, but it's not available anymore. I think there probably are still some libraries that have it, but I don't even know if it's a good book, you know? I do like the main character, Marta Villarreal. I like her a lot, but I don't know. I need to look at it again, you know, see if it still works. I probably won't answer that long. Y'all can ask me yes, no also if you want.
All righty. Do we have any other questions? Our microphone will be making their way to you.
This is Devin bringing the mic. She's the one who brought me to Longmont Library.
Yes, round of applause for Devin.
And she loves applause.
I'm just curious, how did you pick the artists for Earth Divers?
IDW sent me probably a 6-pack or something of artists, and they said, whose work do you like? Well, first of all, they said, who is your dream artist? And my dream artist was Raphael Albuquerque. I think he just is bulletproof as far as pencils and all of it goes, really. Raphael Albuquerque was unavailable, and so they sent me some options. And from those options, I picked the artist who ended up being Davide Gianfelice. And I need to go back and look at who they sent me because, or maybe they were really happy when I picked Davide because Davide is Italian and I'm Blackfeet, and I think they knew this was a Killing Columbus comic. They definitely knew it was a Killing Columbus comic book. And I think they thought, who better to come at Columbus than an Indian and an Italian dude, you know? So I think they had some strategery going on, you know?
Love that. Beautiful. Questions, hands up.
Oh, but what I loved about Davide is when I looked at the samples of his art, he'll do like amazing kinetic panels, and his page layout is great. But what I really, really liked was he does these little it feels like an ink spatter on the page, sometimes around a character. And I don't know what to call those. And I asked him, and he doesn't know what to call those. And nobody I've talked to knows what to call those. But somehow they make everything come alive. And that's what I liked about his art, with those little spatters that look like accidents, but they bring it so alive.
Hello. I was curious about what moves you to write the acknowledgments at the end of your books the way that you do. You're one of the few authors I've read that has longer acknowledgments. And also, it's just really nice to have the second story that comes like a secret story after the main story.
Thank you very much. I don't know when my first longer acknowledgments was. I should go back and look. But I do know that with Only Good Indians, when we finally finalized that book, and the editor, Joe Monte, he said to me, hey, it's time to do acknowledgments. And I said, no problem. I said, how much room do I got? And he said, you got 1 paragraph. And I started writing, and I realized, as long as I don't hit return, this is 1 paragraph, And so I went for 6 or 8 pages, and he didn't slap my wrist. And so ever since then, they just keep getting longer and longer. The book I wrote this summer, I whipped up the acknowledgments right after I wrote the book, so it'd be fresh in my head. And I think they were pushing 30 pages, and I think that's probably too long. So I've got them down to 10 or 11 right now. Really, really dense 10 or 11 pages. But I just love talking about writing. That's my happy place. I do critiques for all of my students' stories, and oftentimes my critiques are longer than their stories,
Hi. I have 2 quick questions. One is from one of your short stories. It took place in a cinema called Big Chief. Was there?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. No, I remember. I grew up around the Big Chief Theater in Midland, Texas.
It was a real.
Yeah,
it's
real.
I was going to ask, was that a real cinema? And what was your experience there?
My experience there was, I think I never went there because we always had the urban legend that if you go there, you're going to get castrated in the men's room.
Was
and
true. That's
so
what
I didn't
want
want to go.
Yeah.
And then it got burned down, so I didn't have to think about it anymore.
I didn't. Wow, it really was based in truth. Okay. The second question was, I know how important comics are to you, but what was the first novel that really spoke to you, not as a writer, but as a person, that helped inform you as a person, find yourself, see yourself?
It was in 4th grade. It was a novel by Wilson Rawls called Where the Red Fern Grows. And that novel changed me forever, and I think it still is part of my writer DNA. I remember we had to check out a book from the library and read it as part of an assignment, and it took me 3 checkout periods to do it because I'm easily distractible, But I was sitting in the library because I think they didn't trust me to leave with the book either. And when I finished it, and I'm sure a lot of y'all have read that, it's about raccoon hunting in Louisiana in 1922 or something somewhere back there. And the last paragraph is an image, and the image is an axe head stuck in a tree. The handle has long since rotted off, and there's a rusty lantern hanging on that axe head. And I remember holding that book closed and thinking, I can do that. I can stick an axe in a tree and hang a lantern on it and look away for 10 or 20 years to let it age. And I always knew from that moment on I could end things. I didn't know if I could tell stories, but I knew I could end things. And I think endings are where writers prove themselves. You know, it's easy to ask questions. It's hard to come up with that answer. That, like I was talking about dominoes and the jump. Like that jump is how you get to the end. You know, it's how you get to that axe and the lantern hanging off it. And sometimes I'm lucky and I get it. I feel like endings are, to use a different model, I feel like there's a plateau. That's your story, like a big mesa, and you run and run and run along the top of it. That's your novel. But then at the end, to get to that graceful, perfect, disinhibiting symbol or whatever you want to call it at the end, you jump off into the darkness and you trust there's going to be something out there to hold you. That's what an ending is, and that's what Red Fern Grows taught me to always try to do.
So I want to ask you about your book, The Only Good Indians. That first chapter is one of the most gripping openings to a book I've ever read. And then it just, over the course of that whole novel, the tension builds, and it's unlike anything I've ever read. And so I'm just curious, what you started with when you were writing that and what the process was over the editing of that.
Yeah, the process of The Only Good Indians is I did Mapping the Interior right after Mongrels, and Mapping the Interior got some attention, won some awards, and so the editor, Ellen Datlow, called me up and she said, hey, that book did pretty good. Let's do another novella. I said, sure, because Mapping the Interior took me 4 days. I figured I got 4 days, you know? And so I sat down to write a 4-day novella, and 4 weeks later I had a novel, and I think it was Babysitter Lives, maybe? And I was like, well, that's a screw up. So I pushed it to the side. And I said, novella time, and I wrote for 4 more weeks, and I had another novel, Killer on the Road, and I pushed it to the side. I didn't know what was going on. I figured I'd forgotten how to write novellas. And I told myself, this time, you're going to stop at 115 pages, no matter if you're in the middle of a sentence or what. And so I told a story, and I stopped at page 110 or something, and it worked out. It was a story. And it was the first part of The Only Good Indians, The House That Ran Red. And it was all, I was so happy because I had finally remembered how to write a novella, but then one more line occurred to me that would open it up into a novel. And so I called my agent up and I said, hey, I finally wrote that novella that I owed Datlow, but I can turn it into a novel. Which do you want me to do? And she didn't even skip a beat. She said, go ahead and write it into a novel. Those are easier to sell. And so then I had to figure out how to make it into a novel, and I did that in probably 3 or 4 more weeks. And then I finally wrote Night of the Mannequins and gave it to Datlow, so I was really happy. But Good Indians, that opening chapter with Ricky Bossribs, it initially came at about 40% through the book. And on revision, before the editor or my agent ever saw it, I reminded myself that I'm writing a slasher here. Well, I guess I should talk about the genesis of The Only Good Indians. It starts kind of, for me, well, it starts in 2 places, but one place it starts is I'm at a banquet seating kind of thing in Los Angeles, somewhere in California, and I'm seated with an entertainment lawyer, and I was like, ding, 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 this is my chance. You know, I get to talk to this entertainment lawyer. And so I started just hitting them with question after question, and they all related to me writing a novel of Three's Company, you know, because I grew up on Three's Company, and I could really knock it out of the park with a Three's Company novel, I feel like. And so I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it from Jack Tripper's point of view or Larry's point of view or whatever. And he said, you can't do that. And I said, no, but I do it really well. And he'd say, that's not what it's about. It's about you not having the rights to those characters, to that story. And so I asked it from a lot of different angles. I was like a little X-wing fighter. Like, I can ask from over here, I can ask from over there. But he saw all those coming, you know, and he shot me down every time. And I finally shrugged. I was like, well, that sucks. And I said, so what if I write a Friday the 13th novel with Jason Voorhees? And he said, same thing. You don't own the hockey mask. You don't own the hockey mask. You can't write that novel. And I left that banquet thinking, you know what? I can write a Friday the 13th novel. I just have to not use a hockey mask. And so the first mask I glommed on was an elk head. And the reason it was a cow elk, not a bull elk, was because I could not conceptualize how any human could stand with an elk rack on their head. And so it was a cow elk. And then I needed a reason for that catalog to be targeting a certain group of people, and so therefore the Thanksgiving classic, The Hunt, happened. And so that's how The Only Good Indians happened. It's because I wanted to write a Friday the 13th novel, which is to say I wanted to write a slasher. But slashers always start like at Lover's Lane with a random killing. You don't see the killer, that kind of stuff. And so on revision of The Only Good Indians, I realized that Ricky Boss Ribs dying at 40% through was that anonymous kill that the slasher, it should be the blood sacrifice to start these gears turning. And so I just kind of tilted the novel, and Ricky slid to the front, and that made everything fall into place.
Hello.
Hello.
So, Indian Lake trilogy. My heart is a chainsaw. There is a lot of horror movies talked about and referenced. And is that you? Is that analogous for you, or was there just a lot of research in like a 3-week period where I'm gonna watch every slasher I can think of?
I did do all that research, but I did all that research in the 80s and 90s, you know? So, yeah, I had to do the research I had to do for Indian Lake was more about like what kind of plants grow at this elevation in Idaho, you know? And the one movie I hadn't seen with the Indian Lake trilogy, which is in my heart as a chainsaw, is Nail Gun Massacre. And when I wrote Chainsaw back in 2018, that movie was not available in physical media, and so I had to read every review and watch every clip and fake it but it's since come out, and someone gifted it to me because they knew I hadn't seen it, but it's been on my shelf. I have not watched it yet, and I'm kind of afraid to watch it because once I watch it, I'm kind of done with Indian Lake and Jade, and I don't want to be done with them, you know, so I'm saving it. Who knows if I ever watch it.
What was the most disturbing character for you to write?
William Colton Hughes, from a book I did called Least of My Scars. I don't know if you've read that one, but he's a twisted individual who, I don't want to give away spoilers, but he's basically a hitman, but he's not a hitman who goes out and kills people. He's a hitman who never leaves his apartment, and his victims are sent to his door. And it's a very Three's Company thing, too. It's like, come and knock on my door, you know? And
Alrighty, I think we have time for one more question, or 2 more questions. Let's do 2 more questions. Anybody up there with a dying question?
man, this is pressure. It's got to be good questions, right?
At the risk of sounding like a total perv, it's going to make sense, I promise. So slasher movies, obviously, like it's like blood, guts, and there's always sex. That's the whole like basis for a slasher is like death and sex. Why don't you why didn't you include that in some of your like slasher-based movies?
My novels that are slashers, you mean? I rarely write sex in my fiction. And the reason I don't do it is because I always feel like when I'm reading somebody writing a sex scene, I always feel like they're like elbowing me in the ribs and saying, look, I know what goes where, you know? Like they're trying to prove to me that they know what sex is, you know? And I don't know, I don't know. So I don't do it very well anyways. But, you know, I kind of side with John Carpenter as far as, like, people always like say slashers are morality tales, you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll get you killed. And I never think that's the case. I don't think that's what they are at all. I think the reason Michael, Jason, Freddie, all them come at people when they're having sex in the back of the van is that they're not paying attention to their surroundings, and they're wrapped up in sheets and they don't have clothes on, so they're very vulnerable, so the slashing can be more effective, you know? So they're just opportunistic predators. They're not punishing people for being what some people would consider immoral, you know? I'm trying to think if I've ever done anything. Let me think. Oh, Teenage Slasher. In Teenage Slasher, there is a couple, there's like some people are killed after skinny dipping, and some people are while skinny dipping, and some people are killed after having sex. But there's a weird build in Teenage Slasher where once a slasher is on the scene, there's like a ripple in the world, and their potential victims start to take on characteristics from horror movies, you know, so they become those type of characters that people expect. But I don't actually go into the camper with them when they're having sex. I just show them when they're coming out putting their clothes on, you know.
For one more question. Let's see who's going to be the lucky winner of that.
I have 2 questions.
Oh no.
We have room for one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Pick your favorite one.
What is it like living as an author?
It's a lot better than dying as an author. I don't know. But I don't know. That's a good question. I've been an author, I'm a published writer for 31 years. Let me think. What's it like? It's weird, I guess. It's weird that like my heart is never not on display. You know, that's the weird thing about being a writer, I think, is that I don't get to hide. And it would be nice to hide, but I don't get to hide. But that's part of art. You don't get to hide, I think. So that's the weird thing about being a writer to me. That's kind of a downer.
Do you want to ask that second question? I'm like, you know what? I feel compelled to get that next one.
Which maybe we should do one more, because that was a downer. Like,
Go ahead.
What publishing services do you use?
not really services. I just have an agent who submits my stuff to publishers, or now I'm just with one publisher. We're kind of like married. And so they publish all my stuff, and my agent negotiates the contracts, and I have booking services that handle my events. So that's if I have a service, it's just my literary agent. She's probably my person who would be that function, I guess.
All righty. Stephen Graham Jones, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. We hope you had a really wonderful and insightful time with us. I know that I did. It's just been just a huge pleasure and honor. Be sure to remember to purchase the books outside at the entrance over here, and there will be a line forming up to get your book signed, so be sure to stick around for that. Thank you, and have a good night.